to another edition of Real Life Renos, the podcast. Our guest today is Izzy Camilleri, who is one of Canada's leading fashion designers. Izzy has won awards such as the Innovation Award and the Fashion Impact Award, and has dressed celebrities such as Angelina Jolie, Mark Wahlberg, David Bowie, and Meryl Streep. Remember the dyed silver fox coat in The Devil Wears Prada? That was Izzy's work. Her work has been featured in Vogue and InStyle magazines, to name two of the many, and last year the NYC Journal called her a fashion disruptor. Today we're talking with Izzy about her pioneering design work in adaptive and inclusive clothing. Adaptive is now the exclusive focus of her work, as she believes everyone should look great and wear well-fitting clothing. Welcome, Izzy.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Nice to have you here today. You worked in fashion and then designed for film when production started to ramp up in Toronto. Tell us a bit about that time.
Well, I started pretty young in fashion, and I entered kind of the high-end fashion because producing in Canada is kind of expensive. So that's why I ended up in that kind of field, and then it opened the doors to working for wardrobe departments in film when actually the Canadian dollar became very low during during the late 80s, early 90s, and so Toronto became a very busy place for film production, and I kind of stumbled onto it, but then it became, the main part of my work.
Right. And then you met Barbara Turnbull. She
Hmm.
was 18 years old and working a little job in a convenience store, which was robbed. And during the course of the robbery, she was shot in the neck and became paralyzed from the neck down. You met her in 2004, and everything changed for you.
Hmm. Yeah, I had never worked with someone who used a wheelchair. I never worked with someone with a disability that was, very high level as hers was. And so I became a bit of a sponge learning all the issues she had with clothes. And not only issues, but limitations and lack of options. So I started doing some custom work for her, and through that relationship, I just learned what her needs were and how I could help her with them. So I didn't know that seeds were being planted. And after a couple of years, I realized that if she had all these problems with clothes, there must be a lot of other people out there with the same problem. And that's how I really started to pursue is adaptive.
Right. So it may sound to our listeners and viewers like we're talking about people who are wheelchair users exclusively, and we're really not. The world of adaptive clothing is quite broad and includes people who are aging, people who have range of motion limitations, people who were born with physical disabilities, as well as progressive diseases, and people who have paralysis. So this conversation is for anyone really who wants to look at maintaining independence while they're dressing. For our
Mhm.
listeners who don't have a disability, can you talk a little bit about how you go about creating clothing for people who do have disabilities?
Sure. Well, I would say one of the, maybe most common issues is dexterity issues. So if you have trouble doing up a button, and that could come with arthritis, it could come with having a stroke, and then it can come with other forms of disability. But finding ways of doing up a shirt, or finding ways of doing up or pulling up a pair of pants that are easier for someone are the type of things that I think about all the time. So magnets can be a solution to replace a button, or just using a larger, or buying a shirt that has a larger button as opposed to a tiny little button could make all the difference in the world, and could also make a person, or allow a person, to dress independently as opposed to having someone else do up their shirt or pull up their fly zipper. Even something like having a zipper pull on a zipper, so that like a larger pull, something that you can stick your finger into to pull a zipper up and down. So all of those solutions are universal. Like, we could all benefit from a button that's a little bit bigger, or having a zipper pull that has something, like it doesn't make it any less attractive. It doesn't make it any less of a garment in terms of just overall fashion and appearance.
And you're talking about a zipper pull that's actually designed into the garment as opposed to an implement that would be carried somewhere to then hook on to the zipper, right? It's actually designed into the fabric or into the zipper.
Yeah, or even just, it could be something that's added on
Right.
and it could be taken off. Or it's just the kind of pull that maybe the manufacturer has found or designed that is permanent, but it still looks attractive and it doesn't take away from the look of the garment at all.
Right. Before we get into a couple of your more popular pieces, you did a TED
Mm-hmm.
a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That's an experience that very few people get to have. Can you tell us a bit about that and the reactions that you got from having done that?
Well, I would say it was the most terrifying thing I've ever done in my life. um, it was a lot of pressure because you have to memorize your speech, and the average length of a TED Talk is somewhere between 14 and 16 minutes. After that, you start losing people. So memorizing something like that, it took a long time. We were given a coach, and to help write our speech, and just in terms of it having all the kind of ingredients, and like just the way that you write it. So there was a lot of editing, there was a lot of rehearsing, and unfortunately we had it all planned to do our TED Talk in April, but COVID had come down, like it was right when COVID started. So it had to be pushed, and then we ended up doing it in a studio, and it was live streamed without an audience. So
Oh,
that took a bit of the pressure off, but it was still pretty intense.
right. I imagine it.
And yeah, yeah. And the reaction was really great, and it was very eye-opening for people. The TED Talk is called Redesigning Fashion, and it was my journey into designing adaptive clothing, but then also my journey into starting the company, and what's happening today in adaptive clothing, because I kind of pioneered a category in fashion that I had no idea that I was going to be a pioneer and revolutionize the way people with disabilities get dressed.
Right. Would that be the game changer pant?
Well, not solely, because the Game Changer pant came many, many, many years after.
Okay.
So I'm just talking about the category of adaptive clothing in general.
In general, right.
Yeah. So the way, because I, I, I had found a way to design clothes for people, let's say, for example, that are using a wheelchair, people that can't stand up to put, let's say, a long coat on. You can't put on a long coat while you're sitting,
Right.
because you would just end up with all this fabric around your waist and behind, bulk of fabric behind you. So, finding a way to design a coat that you can put on while you're sitting that will cover your lap, that's not going to be all jumbled up, and protect you from the elements.
Right.
So that's what I was revolutionizing.
Right. And until then, I know that many of us who have worked with elderly people in particular for many years have seen clothes that do up at the back, and they're primarily made to be easy for caregivers
Hmm.
to access and help people get dressed. But the whole idea of independent dressing, that is revolutionary for sure. Yes.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people just think of like when I started to do my research back in like 2009, all I was seeing is clothing for the elderly or for people living in long-term care. And after I met Barbara Turnbull, I had met another young woman who was injured from her sport. And she was very young, she was in her early 20s. So when I started looking around, you know, um, there's so many people out there that are young that don't want to be dressing in clothing for the elderly. So especially for someone who develops a disability or has a catastrophic injury during the course of their life, they've got a certain identity, and clothing really defines who you are. And, just from first impressions and things like that, or even if you just, you like wearing a particular color, or you like, tight leather pants, or like whatever. And so if clothing, if your choices are stripped away of you because of an injury or a disability that you've developed, that takes a lot of your identity away. So having no choices, or having choices that have been designed for the elderly when you're only 25,
Right.
can be a pretty big pill to swallow.
Right. And I saw that you did a lot of demonstrating of the type of clothing on an AMI network program called Fashion
Mm-hmm.
This.
Mm-hmm.
There are 2 seasons of that out now. I hope they're going to come back with more, because it really revolutionized the game for the subjects that you were all dressing and doing hair for and doing makeup for. You could just see the joy come out on their face.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
must have enjoyed that process quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was a really, really great show to be a part of. And um, I, as you, hope we get to season 3. But it was also very eye-opening for the participants, and our viewers as well, because a lot of people, and including myself, before I started this, I had no idea the challenges that people have, no idea of the limitations. When you see someone with a disability, they're dressed, and you just don't realize what it actually took to get dressed, or how limited their options are. You just kind of take it at face value. So, so yeah, the show has been really great.
The amount of energy that it takes for people with disabilities to do things is a recurring theme in my work. For those who are watching who don't know, I'm an aging in place and accessibility strategist. So this is my wheelhouse, and it does reoccur, this idea of how much energy it takes. And you know what, I did a podcast recently with an architect who talked about redesigning a washroom for a woman, and what used to take her 2.5 hours now took her half an hour, and her joy was in being able to spend that extra 2 hours with her husband and her children.
Mm-hmm.
It's just those things that completely change life for people. So you are absolutely in that category. Speaking of game changing, let's get into a couple of your designs now. The Game Changer pant, which I mentioned earlier, is
Mm-hmm.
certainly one of your signature looks. Tell us about it.
Uh, well, the Game Changer pant is a pant that has a seamless back. And the reason that I came up with this pant is because from day one, when I started as Adaptive back in 2009, people started asking for a seamless back pant. And at the time, I was still learning, and I couldn't understand why that was so important. And the reason that it is important is because the base of your spine when you're sitting is pushing against that center seam that's in the back of your pants. And for people that are wheelchair users who sit for very long periods of time, as well as for people that are paralyzed who can't feel anything, they're not feeling any discomfort, but eventually the tip of your spine, and as well as your sitting bones, can penetrate the skin and cause a sore and an opening, and it's very similar to a bed sore, and it's exact same kind of sore, it's just named 2 different things.
Right.
But it's the pressure that's pushing down on the bone, pushing down on the skin, which could eventually cause the bone can penetrate, it can become infected, and you can develop sepsis, and it can be life-threatening. It's very, very, very hard to heal a pressure sore, and it takes a very long time. So I learned this eventually, but then I started just telling people that, like, I'm a pattern drafter, and I understand how pants are cut and made, and that seam is integral to the cut of a pant. And the reasons being is that it divides right and left. It it creates dimension between the back of the pant to the front of the pant and between your legs. It creates the shape that we need to cup our bum, just
So
everything.
many
Like,
things. Yeah.
yeah, you can't kind of get rid of that seam without a very ill-fitting pant. So, or even like having a baggy pant, you can do it if it's a baggy pant, but then that kind of defeats the purpose, because even if you're sitting on folds of fabric, that could also cause a pressure sore.
Right.
And once a pressure sore, if you've had a pressure sore and it heals, the odds of one coming back are up to, I think it's like 83 or 84%. So if you've had one, you can easily get one again,
Right.
because the skin is compromised in that area and your bone isn't going anywhere.
Right.
So when COVID came down, just before COVID happened, I had a conversation with someone and I told them, the same thing that I had told so many people before, that it wasn't possible. And then when COVID happened, the world stopped. I was at home and I was thinking about it, and I thought, I wonder if it is possible. So I think a couple of days. So I started having conversations actually with people that have had pressure sores. I had conversations with health professionals. And then I went to my studio and started looking at the pattern and seeing how I can manipulate it in such a way that it could be seamless, and how and where I could make that happen. And I figured it out. And then I started to test it on someone who had almost died from his pressure sore. And yeah, so I developed this pant that looks great. It fits great. It allows for people to, like, one thing for this guy who tested them for me, he was only allowed to be in his pants for 4 hours, and he would always have to change because of the pressure. And with our Game Changer pant, he can stay in his pants for way longer, and he doesn't have to worry. So they reduce the risk of developing a pressure sore. So we have them in jeans, chinos, sweats, and a few other things.
Shorts. I saw them on the website.
Yeah, shorts are a new thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. I will link the Is Adaptive site in our show notes. People, you have to go and take a look at these. These are revolutionary. Now, I know that people who are watching and listening are going to be wanting these, but wondering what the price point is. So can you tell us a bit about that?
They range anywhere from $80 to just under $200. We produce in Canada or North America, so we're not producing offshore, so we don't have that same pricing.
Right.
So so it's materials and labor, and because sometimes people comment on the price, but I'm not gouging or anything like that. It takes money to run a business, and also continue to do research and development and all that kind of thing.
Of course, I don't think there's anything to apologize for the price, because routinely I pay close to $200 for a pair of jeans, and this is without the research and your talent having gone into it. So for me, that sounds quite reasonable.
Yeah, and I do try to make it reasonable.
Right.
But there are others that they can't afford it, and sometimes people
Of
don't
course.
understand why they are what they are. But that's why they are what they are.
Of course. Now, you, of course, focus on designs for people who are primarily seated, but you also do standing designs. Can you tell us a bit
Yeah,
about that?
yeah. So that's more for people that, again, it's more about dexterity. So if you have trouble uh, pulling using a zipper, so it's pants that have an elastic waist. Or we also put these pull tabs at the side, so if you have trouble gripping, you can just cup your hands. They're kind of like a belt loop, but they're horizontal, so you can cup your hands in them to help you pull up your pants.
Right.
Or magnets on coats, for example, instead of a button. So it is about easy dressing, and independent dressing when you have dexterity issues.
It sounds like magnets are themselves quite a game changer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, people with
Yeah, and magnets don't work for everybody. Like if you are a wheelchair user propelling your own wheelchair, like a manual wheelchair, when you do the action of propelling, magnets can pop open. So they're not for everybody, but they are helpful for others. I would say they just don't work for, I would say, large busty women or people that are wheelchair users.
now, can people with pacemakers wear clothing with magnets, or have pacemakers
No.
evolved perhaps beyond? Oh no, they can't. Okay, that's good to know. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
but that is
Well,
something that
ones magnets that are near the heart, if
near the heart,
they're,
right?
yeah, yeah.
They put the pacemaker in the shoulder now. My mother had
Mm,
one, and it was, I mean, years and decades ago. It was below her waist, and the wires went up. So that it changed the game of pacemakers when they started putting them in the shoulder.
right,
So
right.
okay, fair enough. The Billy shoes. When I was looking at your website, the Billy shoes really caught my eye.
Hmm. And those are not my product. They're a product of a company in the United States
Okay,
called Billy Footwear.
okay,
And Billy is a wonderful guy who had a catastrophic injury. He's quadriplegic. And when he was trying to, you know, work through his new way of living in a paralyzed body, he had a lot of trouble with shoes. He's a very tall man with big feet, and he had so much trouble that he and a friend decided to start a company, and they developed a shoe that there's a zipper around the top of it, so the whole thing opens, and you just have to place your foot in it instead of feeding your foot into a shoe. And the issue for him and many other people, if you're paralyzed, is that what I never realized when I put on a shoe is that we kind of crunch our toes to get to the end.
oh,
And
there's
so for people that are paralyzed, they can't do that. And what can happen is when you are trying to slide your foot into a shoe, one of your toes could bend back, or you can rip your nail off and you wouldn't even know it until you take your shoe off and you kind of see what's happened. And that's very common. So being able to safely just sit your foot into the shoe and zip it up is another game changer for a lot of people. And even for people that they also come in wide and then even wider, because often people develop a lot of swelling in their feet from sitting all day and from other conditions.
right.
People that also wear an AFO need that extra space in their shoe. So we have a very limited amount of designs, and if you go to the billy.com website, they have a huge range of shoes for men, women, and children as well.
Right. Now, the adaptive clothing business has been estimated to be worth about $350 billion a year, and I assume that's growing.
Hmm.
You offer a consultation service to brands that want to look into this and perhaps branch out. You must hear from people all the time, clients of yours and just people you talk to. Oh, I wish I could wear that brand, but I can't because blah, blah,
Hmm.
blah. What kind
Hmm.
of uptake are you getting from brands? Are the lights going on?
Yeah, we do get um, sought out by brands and people, and even like universities and colleges are now teaching this. So I get um, you know people looking at me to help with papers or to do seminars, because it is a very it's a growing category, and there's not many people that have the experience that I have.
Right.
Um, and now with my game changer pant too, I have a patent for the design of it. So I do want to allow other companies, other brands to license it. And I'm developing a standing version of it as well for people that could be wheelchair users, but also ambulatory. But then also for anybody who, sit all day at their job, or just like the look of them because they are quite interesting. And so yeah, there's lots of possibilities.
Absolutely. Do you do work outside of the Is Adaptive brand now?
I do a little bit. I still sometimes service the film industry, and so we uh, work on lots of different projects. I rarely, but sometimes do custom work for people that live with a disability. It really just depends on my time and what the project is, and if it's something I can do, if the person is close to me, because doing custom work long distance can be very, very challenging.
Right.
Yeah.
So if somebody wants to purchase from Is Adaptive, what do they do?
Mm-hmm. Just go to isadaptive.com and you'll, just see the categories and you can take it from there.
Right. There's a tool that helps you decide what size is best and so on. There's
Yeah, we have a size chart and
the
the
FAQ
options
section
are
is
there.
very good.
Pardon me?
The FAQ section is very good. Lots of information.
Thank you.
Right. Any last words for our audience? Anything that you want to mention?
Well, we have some new products coming up for fall. That will be probably on the site in around a month. But yeah, that's about it. We continue to try and put out, a really good product that makes our clients just feel really great and allow them to live an independent life and look great while they're doing it.
Terrific. Well, thank you very much for your time today. It was a
You're welcome.
really interesting podcast and discussion. And on our show notes, I will put links to Is Adaptive and Izzy's TED Talk and whatever else we can think of. Billy Shoes, we can put that on now as well. And again, my thanks. I would welcome our listeners and viewers to join us again for our next episode of Real Life Renos, the podcast. Real Life Renos, the podcast is a production of Reno Studios, executive produced by Karen Brown. This is Real Life theme, music, and lyrics by Jane Carmichael, recorded at Swamp Songs Recording Studio in Lucan, Ontario, engineered by Matt Weston. Thank you for tuning in.